Hi everyone, this is Amy from the Helms Academy, and today we're doing our Reading and Writing Club recap from September 29th, 2020, when we covered GED Writing Test questions. So I want to start us off today by thinking about what's something new that you learned about grammar this year. Grammar is such a big topic, and especially when we think about the writing portion of the GED or HiSET or TASC tests, we have to know a lot about grammar to be able to answer the questions. But I want you to keep in mind that to succeed on these tests, you actually don't need to know everything about grammar. Especially for the GED and the HiSET, you really only need to answer about 40 to 50% of the questions correctly to pass. And so I want you to keep in mind that knowing everything about grammar is not the goal. It's knowing some of the basics, and it's recognizing what kinds of questions they might ask to be able to answer those questions. So I want you to think about, for you, what's something that you learned this year that you're proud of and that is something new that you've added to your own knowledge of grammar. And give yourself a pat on the back for that, because it's a big deal to learn new things each day. And again, the goal is to keep learning and to be lifelong learners, not to know everything right in this moment. So today for our practice, we're going to look at a practice GED test online and answer 4 questions about it. So here's today's reading passage. Now, I'm not actually going to read the passage with you. What I'm going to do instead is skim over it so that we get a few key ideas about it, and then we'll take it from there. So you can see at the very bottom, this comes from GEDpracticequestions.com. And up at the top, I notice right away, I see a name, a company, and an address. So I know I'm working with a letter. It's also easy to identify when I see Dear Mr. Rogers at the beginning and Sincerely J.E. Johnson at the end. So knowing all of those things, I know I'm working with a letter format. I know that within this letter, it's most likely talking about stove repair and installation or something within that realm, because that's what I see in the company name at the top. And I know that there are 4 questions because in the red areas, you'll see question 1, 2, 3, and 4. Now, with the writing and grammar especially, I'd encourage you to go look at the questions first and then come back and take a look at the passage if you need more context. For the sake of today, we actually are only going to need to look at the questions and will not need the greater context of this passage. So that's a great time-saving tool for you. Let's look at question 1. It says, select the option that correctly completes the sentence. Now, our sentence starts with, however, your subsequent proposal with amounts totaling over $6,800, and we have 4 options. Now, when you just glance at the options, you might notice that they look really similar to each other. In fact, the only difference is the first word of each one. So all we're really looking at here is which verb we need to go with the beginning of the sentence. Would we say were, was, be, or been? Now, I'm going to read through these to hear which one makes the most sense. So, for example, I might say, however, your subsequent proposal with amounts totaling over $6,800 were disappointing in light of my budget limitations. I could also say, however, your subsequent proposal with amounts totaling over $6,800 was disappointing in light of my budget limitations. Now, right away, those 2 options are going to look the best to me because I see that those are what we call conjugated verbs. So were and was come from the verb be. And we need the verb to be conjugated within a sentence for it to make sense. So I'm going to hold on to those 2 options while also looking at C and D. C, we see we have the word be, and like we just talked about, we need that verb to be conjugated. So we can't say your subsequent proposal be disappointing. Nope, not going to work. So C, we can get rid of. And D, your subsequent proposal been disappointing. Well, we could say something like has been or had been, but we can't just say been by itself. And so we know D is also gone. So when we look at A or B, we need to think about our subject, which is your subsequent proposal. So we have your subsequent proposal were or was. Well, there's only one proposal. And so the correct way to say something in the past tense when we're using a be verb, when there's only one of something and not a plural or multiple of something, is to use was. So for number 1, we're going to choose letter B. For question 2, it says select the option that correctly completes the sentence. Quite truthfully, I would not have scheduled the appointment. And again, we see some very similar options here. Had I known, should I known, if I had known, if I had have known. So our 4 options, again, all end with there was a charge. So all we're really paying attention to here is which verb matches with the subject we're talking about here. So here we see I would not have scheduled the appointment. And the other part of the sentence is, should we say had I known, should I known, if I had known, or if I had of known? Well, I'm going to get rid of a few of these right away. Like letter C. I know that if I had knowed is not a word. And so I can scratch letter C very quickly. Letter B, should I known, doesn't make sense. So that's not a grammatical construct we can use. I can also get rid of letter B. So this is where it gets a little tricky. Letter A says, had I known, there was a charge. And letter D says, if I had of known, there was a charge. Now, this is tricky because letter D sounds like something we might say, right? Oftentimes when we're speaking, we might say, if I had have known, but the actual construct does not go that way. Technically, we could say if I had known, but the word of there is extra and unnecessary. And so we should not include it in a correct grammatical structure. While letter A might sound really formal, here it's actually the best option. We can say, had I known, there was a charge. For question 3, it says select the option that correctly completes the sentence. The sentence says, I called to discuss the invoice and explained over the telephone that I felt I was, and then it ends with, to compromise by paying 1/2 the bill. Now, we have the same words here in all of our options. So the only difference is capitalization and punctuation. So our middle words here are misled at that time, I offered. Now, right away, I see the words I offered, which show me that there's a new subject and verb. And when I see a new subject and verb, I know there's a new sentence starting. So when I see that, I'm going to take that information that I offered. I'm going to say, that sounds to me like we have 2 sentences here. Now, this is a good time to play on our knowledge of punctuation. If you've watched some of our past reading and writing clubs, you might remember that there's only a few pieces of punctuation that can be used to separate 2 complete sentences. And we know for sure that one of them is a period. Period can show us the end of one sentence, the beginning of another, as can an exclamation point, a question mark, and a semicolon. We know that one thing that can't separate 2 complete sentences without a connecting word would be a comma. So we would need to add a conjunction if we had a comma there. So when I look at these, I need to look for something that's going to show me that we can separate 2 sentences using, again, period, exclamation point, a question mark, or a semicolon, but not just a comma. So when I look at those options, there's only one that actually has a period in it that could work for this structure, and that's C. Just to double check, I can read it out loud and say, I called to discuss the invoice and explained over the phone that I felt I was misled. At that time, I offered to compromise by paying 1/2 the bill. Makes sense, and it fits in this structure. For our final question today, it says select the option that correctly completes the sentence. And our sentence starts with, the store representative told me that someone would call me back regarding the invoice and we have 4 options. Again, they all look very similar. We need to decide, are we talking about its payment, her payment, its payment, or their payment? So first we need to decide, this is something the payment belongs to, right? All of these have to do somewhat with possession. So are we saying the payment goes with a person or with multiple people, or does it go with it? Well, in this case, we're talking about the payment regarding the invoice, right? An invoice tells you how much you need to pay, and the payment goes with the invoice. So here, we're going to connect payment and invoice with a possessive pronoun that will indicate invoice. Now, invoice wouldn't be more than one, so we wouldn't say their, and invoice isn't a person, so we wouldn't say her. So that leaves us with two options. Is it A or C? Now these two are put here to confuse you because its and its are very similar. ITS means it belongs to it. IT'(S) means that it is. It's a contraction. And so in this case, we want to show possession. We want to show that the payment belongs to it, belongs to the invoice. And so we're going to choose letter A, its payment. Thank you so much for joining me today for this Reading and Writing Club recap. I hope you learned something new, and good luck preparing for your language arts test. You can check out the Helms Academy by subscribing to our YouTube channel and looking at our Facebook, Instagram, and website at helmsacademy.org.